Online for Authors. I'm chatting with Jann Alexander, author of Unspoken. Welcome, Jann.
Hi, Terry. It's fun to be here.
I am super excited to have you. I really enjoyed the book. But before we really dive in, let's do like a quick elevator pitch. What is it that people are going to find when they open up a cover of Unspoken?
First of all, it takes place in 1935 in a mythical town in the Texas panhandle, which is right up in the tippy corner of Texas where Oklahoma is. And it's a place where nobody knows how to fix air. You can't breathe. And there's one very tenacious young girl there who is determined to stake her claim there, despite being unable to really breathe, manage, or anything else. And she'll, of course, first of all, have to face up to what's unspoken.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. That's just enough to make people go, ooh, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So we're in 1935. We're in the Dust Bowl. I can honestly say that the only book I ever remember reading about the Dust Bowl was the John Steinbeck. You know, that's the only one that I recall reading.
I was going to guess that.
Yeah. So what made you say, I'm just dying to write about the Dust Bowl?
Well, okay. First of all, I've been obsessed with the Dust Bowl ever since I saw the movie. I think it came out in 1976 called Bound for Glory, the film about Woody Guthrie, who grew up in the Dust Bowl and literally survived the Black Sunday dust storm. And there's footage there. You can look it up on YouTube if you want to see it, where a dust storm, it's just giant footage way back of the whole town, tiny town, but tiny, big, small town, giant, enormous black blizzard just coming crunching for the town. And it just stayed with me. And so time passed and I started reading some books about it. And then when I moved to Texas, I realized, wow, I'm right. I'm in Central Texas. I'm really nowhere near the panhandle of Texas. If you know Texas, it takes over a day just to drive across it. But
for when are we going to get through Texas, right?
Exactly. They used to say on the train when in the days when you took the train, they used to say the sun has riz, the sun has set, and I am still in Texas yet. Great. But anyway, I just realized I got interested in Texas history, and I realized I'm right here where the Dust Bowl happened. Surely I can find out more. And I did probably 10 years of researching off and on. And I have a giant collection of everything you want to know about Texas. It didn't all get into the book. Isn't that a surprise?
Hey, isn't that a surprise? Isn't that the way it is with research?
But I started thinking about how nobody thinks of the Dust Bowl without thinking of John Steinbeck, and everybody left. And I wanted to think about what would it be like to stay and to want to make it your home.
So I love that because I play that what if game when I'm writing books too, where something will happen and I'll think, well, what would it be like if, and so that's what you did. Well, what would it be if they stayed?
Yes,
instead
exactly.
of if they left. Right?
And what if they all didn't agree about staying?
Right. And
what if the two adults in the family maybe disagreed about it and the kids had no say? What about that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So one of your main characters is Ruby Lee. She's the little girl who eventually we see as a young woman.
Uh-huh.
Is she like a pure figment of your imagination, or is she someone that that you've kind of put into this role?
I would have to say she's a little of all of those things, sort of drawing on my knowledge of psychology, because I think when you write characters, you really have to write them as real people. You can't just make up their behaviors. You have to have, everyone has a reason for behaving the way they do. They may not recognize what that reason is, but they have it. And you have to kind of get down in there and really get into that. So, it helps to have lived a nice long life and been an observer of human nature. And
that's what I tell people too. I said, sometimes my books, they have me.
Yes.
And they have me like I used to be, like I am now, like I wish I was.
Right. Yeah.
I think I might be later. And then other people that
people, yes, the poor other people that land in our books. Yeah. But, I really like sussing out in general whenever anyone is having a hard time or behaving a different way than I would have, I really try to go, now, what could have happened in their background to make them...
What's their motivation, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
So it works out well to apply it in writing too.
So in addition to the Dust Bowl, which was horrible enough on its own, we also see Ruby Lee, who is in a group home. I can't remember what the name of your group home was, but it was like it was for indigent and orphaned kids. It was for dependent and neglected children. Okay, right.
Isn't that a great name?
Horrible.
I did not make that up.
Right. And then there was a mental institution where her mother is. And both of them are horrific. I was just, I couldn't even begin. Like I've heard stories. It's not like you've never heard it, but then to see it all in one place and have these characters that you're coming to love experiencing these things. So let's talk research. You said you have research. Let's talk research.
Okay.
What did it take to find out about these group homes, to find out about the mental institution and the kinds of things they did, to find out about, what it was like trying to breathe Dust Bowl air? Like, what was that like?
Well, there's a remarkable body of work out there about all that if you're willing to dig. And of course, the goal is to find the first person accounts. And, I learned pretty quickly that the way to find the first person accounts is to go to the references in any book or on Wikipedia page or, any library, anything that's got background, just go straight to the references and then start digging into those. And then those will have references. That's how you get into the research rabbit hole. But
yes.
Yeah. And then there's just tons of footage online that you can find about the way things looked. There's a remarkable repository of photography at the Library of Congress, my most favorite institution that we have, which has just documents after documents, first person oral histories. It has photographs that were made by really good photographers of the times, not just the Dust Bowl era, but in general. And it has original handwritten things. It has maps. It's just, if you like to pretend you're in another place, that is where you want to go. You'll see what to be wearing. You'll see what kind of car you had. And if you didn't have a car, you'll see what your thumb was doing, or what train you were hopping. And so that's really kind of how I worked it all out. And there were a couple of really notable first person accounts that I found on being in state homes and on just ordinary people wrote about surviving the Dust Bowl. And they had oral histories about that sort of thing too. And so I was able I just found all of the details very fascinating and also horrific. Like when we're looking at Ruby Lee's mom and she's in this mental institution, and the things that they're doing to her on purpose. Yeah. Like purposefully making her have seizures and purposefully messing with her blood sugar levels and doing all of these things in order this was typical of the times. They truly believed this was the highest medicine could get. And I think they believed that. I do think they also didn't have a clue what to do. And so they were willing to try these things. Just try anything. And I guess they thought, well, these people are essentially beyond hope anyway. Right. So if we can do anything that helps, then I guess it's better. It just, it sounds so, when you look at it from a perspective of having more understanding, it looks horrible. But I tell people the same thing, that someday we're going to look back at like chemotherapy and we're going to say, what were we doing? Because it's so hideous and it's hideous. It's like, all we have. Yeah, let's give them poison. Let's give them poison and see if they get better before the cancer grows. Right. And when you think about it in those terms, it's horrific. So I feel like it's going to have that same kind of thing where 100 years from now, there's going to be an author talking to another author going, how did you find out about that? And it's going to be the same thing, incredulous that people did that. But I do think that despite the extraordinarily awful circumstances that mother and daughter found herself in, I tried to show that they just were not to be cowed by it. They were indomitable. They would figure out a way around it. In the case of the mom, what she did, and Ruby, she made many efforts, I mean, I always say Ruby is like more tenacious than fire ants, she will not quit.
I love that. I love that. So I want to talk just briefly about endings without giving anything away. But your ending does not wrap everything up in a nice, neat bow. So we get to the end, and it's not like every issue is all wrapped up and pretty and everybody has a happily ever after from that point on, right? And I am a happily ever after writer. Like, I like to wrap everything up in a neat bow. And so when I find an author who doesn't, I'm curious, like, why? What keeps you from wrapping up everything in a nice, neat bow?
Well, is life that way? Does life wrap up in a nice, neat little bow? No, it doesn't. See, I actually don't like reading books. It seems too pat and too impossible to me when everything is tied up nice and neatly. Say romance books would do that, for example. But it just seems really false to me. I mean, it's just, I like the idea of, if you like to read historical fiction, I like the idea that you're there because you want to try to imagine yourself in those places and figure out how you would react, how you would deal with it, what you would do. Would you like it? Maybe you would, maybe not. Well, it just makes sense to me that you as a reader are going to want to have some thoughts to be thinking about it at the end of the book. You don't want me to tell you how it ends.
Right. So when I'm wrapping things up, it isn't always pretty.
Right.
But I usually try to make sure that everyone knows where the ending was. And, you left some places very open to the point that I wondered if we were going to get book 2.
Oh, I have book 3, 4, 5 in here. And my publisher has book 2, and I'm waiting on a word about that. And I have book 3 in my Mac. So, I mean, there's more, but I'm not writing them in a linear way. So
I was going to say, is it more on Ruby Lee, or are we going to get new characters?
Well, wouldn't that be a spoiler if I told you that?
No, I guess, but I'm just,
No, you know what? So if you think about the way Elizabeth Strout writes, and I love her books, and of course she's written over a long period of time, but people pop up in one book that don't appear in the next book, and then they reappear as a minor character in another book, and then they maybe are a major character one day. And I love the idea of creating a whole world of people who will come and go, and we'll hear about them. Sometimes they star in their own books, sometimes they're take a step back. So that's kind of what I have in mind.
Okay, well, that's good. That's like I said, I was just kind of curious about that, because when it finished up, I had so many questions.
Well, you can always ask me. But not
on this show, because I don't want to spoil it for the readers. But it was like, well, what? And so then in my mind, I have to fix it.
Yes.
So I'm kind of writing the story in my head as to, okay, well, this is what I think happened, and then this is, and I want this to happen, so I'll make that happen in my head. And it is interesting, because I've had people say of my books, well, whatever happened to such and so character, Did she marry? Did she have children? And my answer always is, do you want her to?
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, yeah. And I'll say, then she did.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's perfect. Well, what do you think happened,
It's like, what do you need to have happen? And that's what happened.
Right.
Absolutely.
And also, your author doesn't always have everything figured out. Your author kind of likes the game of figuring it out later to make it all, sort of backwards engineering it to make it all work.
Absolutely. Are you a plotter, or are you a pantser? A little of both? How do you?
Oh, I'm kind of more both, but I think writing historical fiction, you need that architecture of the real events.
Yeah.
In order the real events are what inspire me to write a story, because I know the characters have to, over the point of time of the story, they have to evolve. And I know that whatever they start out wanting isn't really the thing they need, to quote the Rolling Stones. So I think, to have the architecture of actual real events and real people I was super careful to make sure everything was very accurate. Yeah. And if I had a real character and a location in the book, that person really was there at that moment in time. Right. And yeah, so anyway, I just kind of feel like that's what underpins everything. And to a certain extent, I can plot it all, but, it's pointless to do it. When I first started writing books, this is the second book I've written, and the first one was like, well, I have to have the plot all figured out, and I realized that little ideas and minor characters and everything bubble up as you're writing, and it's kind of pointless to have it all plotted out.
I like that process of
I do too. Yeah.
And you're right. With historical fiction, there's certain things that have to happen because history dictates that before this event, this happened, and after that event, this happened. So those things, kind of carry it. But I tend to have not a lot else. I have usually a character, and I know where I'm placing them. And then I just start writing, and I kind of see like what's going to happen next. I'm often surprised.
Yeah.
It's like I have this little idea and then I just run with it and see, well, where's that going to go and what's going to come of it. So.
I know. I think it was in this book, it was particularly true of the minor characters. They just suddenly appeared. I did not set out to have, okay, we'll have her, and her, and then we'll have him, and then we'll have him and her. But some of them were based on true archetypes or true people of the time, but I changed names. Yeah.
Right.
Other actual historical figures you would recognize, I didn't change their names. They just appear.
Right. Yeah. Right. I think you and I are a lot alike when it comes to the historical fiction part, that when we're looking at the history, I want my history to be accurate. Now I realize I wasn't there. I can't be 100%, but by golly, I'm going to be as close as I know how to be.
Exactly.
And I really get bothered by historical fiction that I read that take license with real people. It's one thing to let your fictional character do whatever it is that you want them to do. And it's a whole nother to take someone who's real and what really happened to them and then have an alternative ending. Yeah,
you can't really have an alternative universe for real characters. Yeah.
And I've read several books that way where, you're learning about this person and you get to the end and you think, oh my gosh, that was unbelievable. And then you find out, well, it's unbelievable because it was not true. And so then I go back and do my research and it's like, now, wait a minute. We know what happened to her.
Right. And what's the explanation for why she did or didn't do that? Yeah.
Yeah. And I have problems with that. Some people really like it, but I kind of feel like if you're going to write historical fiction, the historical part needs to be accurate. Your fiction can be fiction, but you can't take truth and make that fiction and then call it historical fiction. Now we're just into some other genre. Right. So.
It's true. And I don't see, in my case, I didn't have such a hard time making the true historical people speak what they spoke. Because I could go back and look at either their diaries or their quotes about them in the newspaper or in a book where they were firsthand quoted. I kind of could suss that out. So I'm not sure you can always do that, but I just chose people.
Well, and then if you can't, then it's okay to take a little license as long as you're following the general arc of what that person is like.
Yeah, sure. It has to be in character with that real life person. And you have to make sure that the real life relatives and descendants are not going to sue you. So
exactly.
You don't want to say anything. Don't say anything inflammatory.
Absolutely. So other than a really good story, which it is, what do you want people to get from the book when they walk away?
Oh, somebody who did an advanced review said this thing to me the other day and it blew me away. And I realized that's what I want. He said up until he had read my book, the Dust Bowl was just like a footnote in his historical, learning. And there's so much more to it. And to me, why it's really relevant is the themes are the same then as they are today. There's homelessness. There's families driven apart. There's families estranged. There's family members estranged. There are there's like mass migration that went on in the Dust Bowl. We don't even think about this, but think how shocking it is that 2.5 million Americans left those states where the Dust Bowl was in the decade of the 1930s. So 2.5 million people found it to be uninhabitable and they left. And 500,000 people got left homeless. And so we look at these things and like this is what we hear about today,
Exactly.
And I just think it's very valuable to remind ourselves that history keeps repeating itself despite our desire that it wouldn't. And also to try to bring empathy to the understanding of what it would be like to be in a scenario like that. You might get displaced from your home in the 1930s and it seems really remote. Well, can you apply that today to people who are getting displaced today from their homes for whatever reason? And can you feel something for them? To me, that would be the ultimate thing to understand.
I love that about the historical fiction, is that inevitably the same things that were happening, and not just here in the United States, but in different parts of the world, it keeps coming up. My latest novel was set in the 1890s in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina.
Ooh, I want to read that.
And people said to me, "Oh my gosh, so many of the themes are just like today." And it's like, that's because as humans, we've not become much more advanced. Right. I mean, we have with technology, but in terms of how we deal with one another, it's pretty much the same.
It pretty much is.
There's always a group that's in and there's always a group that's out. And, families still have the same issues where some love one another and others have become estranged and don't want anything to do with their family. There's the mother-daughter tensions. There's religious tensions. There's all the things. And it really hasn't. The flavor has changed.
Right.
Like maybe it was vanilla last week, it's chocolate this week, like whatever it is, but it's the same thing. It's the same things.
Yeah. And as challenging as all the things about family are in this book, in Unspoken, I really like the idea of I kind of got into this as I was writing it, exploring, well, what the heck is family, and what do you do when you don't have the family you want? And is it possible to do something about that, as Ruby
and I like that idea of found family.
Yeah.
Where it's like you create a family based on who's around you.
Right.
And we often do that.
But you may not recognize that you've done that, until it's too late. So all of those things to me are very valuable, life lessons. And it's good to see that they happened in the past. It's not good that they happened in the past so much as it's good to see, maybe there's a new path forward than what we were doing the last time.
Right. Yeah. I think it also gives people a chance to try to identify in a way that's very safe, because when you're looking at the past and you identify a problem, it's not scary in the same way as if someone forces you to look at it right here
and now. Yes. Yeah. It's very true.
So like I think about like racism. Well, we can look at what did racism look like in the 1890s. And in my book, it's against the Cherokee Native tribes. And, we can look at that and it doesn't scare us as bad as looking at today and racism and what does that look like for you or me. Right. And so I think it does give people a chance to try on those social things and see well, what do I think and what would I do and how would I have handled it? And do I agree or do I disagree? And it's done in a very safe space.
Yes, it is. And, I think we probably all read to escape. Now, we also like to learn when we read, but of course we wouldn't like to read if we weren't learning. So that's why we like to read historical fiction. It just takes us away and sweeps us into some other place and time. And then maybe we're a little more accessible, to understanding how things can happen to all the best intentions can happen to the same people. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
So you've alluded to the fact that you've got book 2 and 3, 4, and 5 in your head. Do you have anything other than this series in your mind? Are there other books that you're kind of putting on hold while you finish up this series?
I kind of do, but I think, I found some family history once that shocked me about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. And ever since then, it comes to me every couple of days, now how would you put that into a story? It hasn't come to me yet, how that would be a story. But one of these days, I will break it out
and figure that out.
Switch. Yeah. But I'm pretty enamored with this little world I've created called, the town is called Heartless. But it's
I love the name of it, Heartless. It's absolutely perfect.
Although it's spelled H-A-R-T,
right?
Because it's situated on Hartley County,
right.
a real county in Texas. And so it just seems to me like there's a lot of material there I can work with in Heartless.
Absolutely.
And I'm just very enamored of it. I want to keep working on it.
Well, good. I think that's fabulous. So, hey guys, if you want to keep this conversation going, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. There you're going to have a chance to win a digital copy of Unspoken. Find the post, tell us something that you liked or learned while on listening to this podcast, and you will be in the drawing. So, Jann, if someone wanted to get up with you, talk with you about your writing, talk with you about the Dust Bowl, talk with you about anything at all to do with reading and writing, how do they do that? How do they reach you?
They can reach me right at my website, jannalexander.com. And please notice Jann has two N's. Two N's. And if you're in a book club and you want to talk, I am your girl. I really want to talk to book clubs about this. I think it's just ripe for discussion.
It is.
And so if I'm in your area, I'll make it possible to get to you. And if I'm not, we will Zoom and have a great time talking.
Isn't Zoom an amazing tool for authors?
Yeah, it is.
To be able to do book clubs in other places. I love that.
Yeah.
So, hey guys, run right out, grab yourself a copy of Unspoken. You're going to love it. Once you've read it, make sure you go on Amazon and you review it. As authors, we can really use those reviews. Mm-hmm. And Jann, I want to thank you so much for being with me today.
Oh, the pleasure was all mine, really. It's so fun to talk with you, Terry. You should interview me all the time.
I'll keep that in mind.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.